From a highly secure network of top secret locations across North America, this is the Spurs Insider podcast. It's a mid-rodeo road trip edition, a pre-All-Star weekend edition, a frigid snowstorm, ice storm on the East Coast edition. I am your host, Mike Finger, joined as always, this time by our complete panel of Express News, Spurs beat writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn with sports editor Nick Talbot. It has been quite a week on the road with the Spurs. Jeff's been out there. Tom's been out there on the road. I've been on the road. We have seen some nail biters, 3 one-point games in a row. We have seen new point guard of the future, De'Aaron Fox, settle into his clutch role with his new team. We've seen some heartbreakers. And Jeff, I'm going to start with you. You are in a frigid, highly secure location. Just how do you sum up what has happened since we last talked to the people?
What has happened since we last talked to them? I can't remember the last time we talked to the people. Where was I?
I believe it was.
I was in Memphis.
I was in Memphis. It was Memphis. Yes.
So they were
ages ago.
They were blowed out in Memphis, but then, like you said, in comes De'Aaron Fox. First game is against Atlanta. That's a 1-point win for the Spurs. His next game is a 1-point loss for the Spurs in Charlotte. The game after that is a 1-point loss for the Spurs in Orlando. And then last night, it was a relative blowout in Washington, a 10-point victory for the Spurs. So, yeah, it's been an interesting week for sure.
So the people tuning into the podcast, I don't think they are waiting for just the scores after we got. I think they want insight. They want opinion. They want hot takes.
Well, why are the
scores were?
They listening to this podcast.
How about the mood of the team? Is this a team on the rise? Is this a team on the fall?
You want to know about the mood of the team? I don't think it ever changes.
Everything is falling apart heading into the break.
I don't think it ever changes. I think they were very giddy and happy last night. You got Sandro driving a freaking whatever you call those things, cart around the hallways of the
Powers mobile.
Yes,
for the people who are aware of old movies from the 1990s, when Austin Powers was driving that vehicle that
him
couldn't go forward or backwards in a hallway. That was Sandro Mamukelashvili last night at
Capital One
Arena in Washington D.C.
Them goofing off, but like even at 1-point loss in Orlando, they're goofing off. 1-point loss in Charlotte, they're giddy. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's the team mood of the team doesn't seem to change very much. So if that was your question, well, it doesn't seem to change that much.
How about the maybe mood is the wrong word. How about outlook?
Outlook? Is that what you want?
Like, I will tell you something. I'm going to bring in Tom here a little bit because we missed him last week, and he always brings more gravitas to the discussion. But one thing that has changed around this team in recent weeks, not necessarily just this week, but it seems like the play-in discussion, the play-in possibility is growing a little more tenuous. Like there was a long time when the Spurs were right there in it, either in the 10th spot, a game out of the 10th spot, what have you. Now it seems like there's been a little bit of separation, and I'm going to bring in Tom for his gravitas and for his opinion as to whether we still should be talking about the play-in heading into All-Star Week. Is that still something that your local Cager should be vying for?
Well, the outlook long-term is rosy after getting Fox. Short-term, it's still a couple of 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 rebounds away. So it's if you crunch the numbers, they gotta go pretty far above 500 the rest of the way to get back into the to get a play-in position. So I don't know about that. But one thing also in your introduction, Mike, you were talking about things we witnessed, and maybe we can get to this later, but I witnessed one of the greatest offers from a Spurs player to a member of the media. Probably
let's call that a teaser for later. I don't think we can get into this.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I said that. Tease it for later.
Okay, we'll tease it for later. I introduced you as the guy who was going to get serious.
I did.
We've had this impact on you, all the idiots around you, the numbskulls. We brought you down to our silly level. But we'll get into the silly offer that I may or may not be able to refuse later.
Long term, it's great. Fox, I mean, yeah.
But let's do that. De'Aaron Fox.
Well, here's what I wrote
I'm
about
talk basketball right now. De'Aaron Fox is who we thought he was.
Yeah.
And that's not a hot take here necessarily, but he fits. He's super fast. Jeff and I and some people up at Capital One Arena were talking last night about, like, is 27-year-old De'Aaron Fox as fast as 27-year-old Tony Parker was? The fact that nobody could say yes or no with authority, I mean, that tells you something right there. That dude gets to places. He gets to the rim like nobody the Spurs have had in a long time. His fourth quarter clutch gene, like, that's been evident so far in all these close games they played, even the ones they've lost. He hit a potential game winner with 7.9 seconds left against Charlotte, and hit another one that would have won the game, but it was maybe 0.2 of a second too late. He made the pass to Wemby in Orlando. We'll talk about that a little bit. Made all plays down the stretch, taking turns with Victor against Washington. Like, let's just go with the De'Aaron Fox, what we've seen so far. I think that this is a guy who fits and is who we thought he was. Anybody dispute that?
I mean, yeah, you're gonna have to be careful that this doesn't get aggregated into some hot take. That's the hottest take I've ever heard. The De'Aaron Fox trade was a good idea, Mike Finger says.
Yeah,
a genius.
That's gravitas.
It's gravitas for you.
Did anything about?
Yeah, I mean, like it's almost crazy because that kind of was one of the things he was billed as, is this fourth quarter like savant. Like he won the Clutch Player of the Year a couple years ago, and since 2020 he's like the third most clutch points in the league. And then he comes in and, like, first game in Atlanta, there he was, and then the game in Charlotte, he basically won it twice. Like, it's not his fault that there wasn't 0.2 of a second more, but Orlando,
get him in.
Yeah, Orlando, like you mentioned, we can talk about whether that was a good player or not. The Spurs team think it was, and then again last night, him and Wemby just took over that fourth quarter in Washington. They had all their points for a 7-minute span of the fourth quarter when the game was in balance, just going back and forth. Sometimes it was Wemby, sometimes it was De'Aaron. Sometimes it was Wemby to De'Aaron. Sometimes it was De'Aaron to Wemby. Like, and I think when you watch that fourth quarter, and yes, there's the big asterisk that it was the worst team in the league they were playing. But when you watch that fourth quarter, you kind of see where the Spurs at least hope this is going between those two. Just playing off one another, running pick and rolls to where the other team has to pick a really bad option to guard it. And then the next step eventually, and this is more of a team building thing for the offseason, is when you start to put guys around that are going to hit 40% from three. So then when defenses do sort of figure out a way to half guard that pick and roll, now you're kicking to a guy that's like just a dead-eyed shooter. That's when this offense is really going to take off. But you could see it last night in Washington. The bones of it, the skeleton of what they're looking at. And it should be really exciting if you're a Spurs fan.
When you go back to Charlotte, Tom, post-game talking to Wemby, who is the one guy who does seem to take losses pretty hard. Jeff jokes about how
he's the only one.
He'll wins and losses. The losses still tear Wemby apart. But one thing that he mentioned after that, just heartbreaker against the Hornets, was sort of the instant credibility that De'Aaron Fox has with this team. And like, I can't imagine just walking into a locker room, walking into a huddle, even with the resume that De'Aaron Fox has, and saying, I'm going to take all these shots down the stretch. I'm going to be the guy down the stretch. Like, there has to be some kind of awkwardness there. Or I shouldn't say there has to be. It seems like there could be. But the Spurs, that's what the Spurs got him for.
Yeah.
That's what De'Aaron Fox thinks of himself. And as Wemby said that night, Tom, like, we don't trust halfway. We trust him 100%. If we're going to trust him, we're going to trust him 100%. And that to me has stood out about this first week of De'Aaron just immediately being trusted by the guys around him.
Yeah, the gravitas is there. Without question, in clutch situations, but also, this might be overstating it, but the force of personality, he's got a great personality.
He does.
And he came right into that locker room. He's joking, he's kidding, he's giving Stephon Castle a hard time about not observing the rookie got to do certain tasks for the vets. A long-standing tradition. I mean, he was, just a great personality. So I think you add all that together, and that's part of why he stepped in right away and was a perfect fit.
And look, part of covering a season like this is you have two very different types of Spurs fans in terms of their reaction to a season like this. There's probably way more than two types. There's all different sorts of shades of gray, but the extremes are this season does not matter at all. It's all about the future. We never expected them to compete for the playoffs anyway, and we're just building, and it's okay that they're not winning every game. Then the other side is, oh my God, fire the coach, redo everything about the lineup because they're blowing this chance to get into the play-in. And I understand sort of degrees of both of those extremes. It would be good to compete for the play-in this year. It would be good to play meaningful basketball into April, and I think the Spurs still hope to do so. And when you look at a week like this past week, they won a couple of times, but this was, even though it's the rodeo road trip, like this was a soft spot in the schedule. You had the Hornets and the Wizards, who are two of the worst teams in the league. You had the Hawks and the Magic, who have not been playing great over the past month or so. Like, those are not powerhouse teams. You want to do a little better than 2-2 in that stretch, and that's totally fair to think that. Like Charlotte, you say the Spurs were breaking in new guys against Charlotte. Well, Charlotte had traded half their team, and then the Lakers sent one of their guys back, and Charlotte still got him that night. So it's very fair to quibble with some of the games they've let get away. But I think the best way to watch a season like this, navigate a season like this, is to realize it's kind of a little bit about the future, a little bit about the present. Take progress where you can find it. And there's plenty of negative to talk about it. Like, if we want to get into rebounding, if we want to get into second chance points, some defense stuff, there's all kinds of things those guys can improve on.
That's what's
boring.
holding them back.
What I wrote about the play-in chase is, if we're sitting here at the end of the year and the Spurs have not made the play-in, you can probably point to just three specific jump shots in February. The Bam Adebayo game winner for the Heat over the Spurs. Pick one against Charlotte, but it's the Fox one that's just a tick too late, and then the one that Wemby couldn't pull off in Orlando. And it isn't fair to do this. Fans like to do this. Like, we could have won all three of those games if everything goes our way. Well, then you have to do the other thing you have to look at the other way for the games that you won that way. But anyway, if those three jump shots had gone the other way for the Spurs, they'd be over 500 right now.
Yeah.
So it's I think we're probably going to look back at if the play-in was someone's goal, or they're living and dying with the Spurs in the play-in. I think you're probably going to look back at this week in February as being the time that it probably slipped away. But besides that, like you said, I don't know that it's all about that for this team this year. Which brings me to the thing, we got to talk about this, I think, because if you were on social media, Spurs fans are some of the group that you're talking about.
I don't really want to do this, but go ahead.
It's screaming about this, but how do you play, or why do you play De'Aaron Fox and Chris Paul together? They're 2 6'3" guys. Aren't you a small backcourt that way? And why would the Spurs do this? And I think you have a piece coming out in the Express News and all the places you can get that, including, you might want to talk about the text thing that they're doing.
You are just a Segway champion today.
Yes, but you have a column about this, and I would like to talk about it because I think it's an important thing for people to think about.
I am just stunned at your just out of the blue professionalism, which is so uncharacteristic of you.
I had a couple
that was really well done. You worked in the promo that our great producer Monty Bach wanted me to do about the subtext, and subtext just does not mean subtext anymore in the way that I learned about it, like in English class back in decades and decades ago. Subtext is now a thing that Spurs fans can sign up for by texting GSG, as in Go Spurs Go. Text GSG to 210-934-9628, and you get all our stuff that we write about the Spurs sent to you via SMS. And some people
What's that number again?
That number again, text GSG to 210-934-9628. And if you'd have been on the subtext the day that we recorded this, you would have got Jeff's alert to Jeff's fine story about the budding synergy, the budding relationship, on-court chemistry between De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. You would have got also a text, I think, about a column that I honestly, all of this sounds disingenuous, but I sincerely enjoyed doing the Chris Paul column, which I hope people read, because I like Chris a lot. I think we all like Chris a lot. Just he's an adult in the room. He tells you what he thinks, and had a chance to have a one-on-one with him for a while in Washington, basically asking, why are you still here? Covering the topic of why the Spurs are starting you. Why do you want to start next to De'Aaron Fox? Why did the Spurs want him starting next to De'Aaron Fox? And it's sort of fascinating. And as Jeff said, it's worth a larger discussion, because Chris Paul signed in San Antonio last summer, basically because they were the one team that guaranteed him a starting spot. He wanted to hoop, as he said over and over again. He was intrigued by Wemby, intrigued by playing for Pop, all that type of stuff. But it was basically about the opportunity. And over the past 3 months, he's been a huge, huge part. Even the people who are screaming out there that Chris Paul should be benched, I think everyone who's watched this team acknowledges how big of an impact that little dude has had on the roster so far, in so many ways. Like, not only in unleashing Wemby, but in just like his confidence, his belief it's contagious. The other guys, he makes other dudes believe. If you've enjoyed watching Stephon Castle this year, like, Chris Paul has a huge role in that. Those two are joined at the hip in the locker room. Chris Paul loves his, he calls him Monk. And so the point is, like, Chris Paul has had an impact that the Spurs hope continues. And yes, they traded for their point guard of the future. And yes, Chris Paul is probably going to be gone before the Spurs compete for another title. But they can still get more out of him. And the Chris Paul side of it is, he told me he did not go to the Spurs at all. He did not even dream of mentioning the idea of sending him off to a contender at the deadline. Now that he's kind of built himself up again, he's played in every game. He's basically been an Iron Man. I'm sure a contender would take him, would find use for him if that was possible. But he didn't ask for that. He didn't ask, like, name the names, Jeff. LaMarcus Aldridge, Rudy Gay. How many guys recently have Pau Gasol, maybe? How many guys recently have the Spurs kind of either waived or traded or allowed to move on to teams that will allow them to chase a ring? They would have gladly done that. Chris Paul makes about the same salary in the last year of his deal as Trey Jones did. They could have easily sent off Chris Paul in the De'Aaron Fox trade, hung on to Trey Jones, who would have been happy backing up De'Aaron Fox. They wouldn't have had to mess with much in that regard. They wanted to keep Chris Paul around, in large part because Chris Paul wanted to be around. And I think this may make me sound, I don't know, idealistic or whatever. Like, people are screaming, but what about the X's and O's? What about their shortcomings as a duo? But I think that having that guy want to be around and continue to make the impact that he does in huddles, in the locker room, during games, like that's worth it. And it's not just that they're doing a favor to Chris Paul. They're doing a favor to themselves by keeping him around, by keeping that voice. Jeff's talked to a lot of people around the team. Go ahead and there's a lot. The Spurs have guys that they like in the program, guys who are turning into leaders, guys who have a voice, but nobody, Jeff, has the same substance of that voice that Chris has.
I mean, the way you put it is correct. He did them a favor by coming here. Now you could say that the Spurs did him a favor too by giving him a big role, but that was the kind of the handshake deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you're not going to send him to the bench and just almost renege on that. You're just not going to do it. I think if the goal of the organization this year was we have got to at least get in that play in, darn it, like we have got to not just compete for it, but we got to get there and we got to win as many games as humanly possible. I think X's and O's wise, you don't organize your rotation that way. You don't start Chris and De'Aaron together. But I don't think that's where the Spurs are organizationally. I think they would love to make the play in if they luck out and get there. But I don't think that's the overriding goal of every decision that they make this year. And so if you're in that situation, then you're in a position where you can basically live up to the terms of your handshake agreement with Chris Paul and let him hoop because he's given you so much as well.
And I would,
he didn't have to come here.
I would take it a step further than that and say that having a happy, engaged Chris Paul actually makes them better this year. I think that they're sacrificing nothing in terms of play-in by playing him out there because like I just think he's why they were in the play-in to begin with, having that guy involved and engaged and around and contributing, by the way. And as he told me last night, he believes he can shoot. He's always wanted to play off the ball. This is a role that he's always wanted. He thinks he can be effective there, and be able to play longer and attack from different areas where he's not used to attacking because he doesn't have the ball in his hand the whole time. I think that the first quarter against Charlotte was horrific, and maybe that was because of the downside of the Chris Paul De'Aaron Fox pairing, but they got out to just as huge of a lead last night against Washington, right, with those guys out there. And, eventually there will come a point when you want to see that, and like this is the opposite of the argument we had last week, right? Where I was the one saying
you've changed your mind. I think I've been pretty consistent.
Yeah, I did change my mind on that.
I'm glad you come around
of it. I see the upside. Basically, what I see is there's no huge downside to it.
Because the worst thing you have is you don't make
that there are some X's, O's things where it hurts them a little bit.
I mean,
there's not a huge downside to it. I don't think it really costs them games.
Like taking Steph Castle out of that starting lineup in favor of a smaller guy, it's going to hurt your rebounding. It's going to hurt you defensively. It just is. Like I don't see any way around that. But I just don't think it's.
One thing that has changed Stephon Castle wise, though, by the way, we had so much to get into this week. Like I think he might be a Rookie of the Year contender again, leader.
Yeah,
and he's played really well off the bench.
Yeah,
then he scored.
Yeah, we're changing gears here. Are we changing gears to Steph Castle now? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, okay, sure. I just want to say before we wrap up the Chris discussion, they just don't have another person. And maybe this is obvious. They don't have another person on the roster like him, with his, to use the word of the day, gravitas. To what's the word that De'Aaron Fox used? Substance. Everything he says is substance. If you go down to like a huddle during a timeout, like the Spurs don't have a guy before Chris, without Chris, they don't have a guy that's really going to talk at all. Like they have a lot of quiet guys. Even Harrison Barnes, who's a great leader, is more of a lead by example guy. Chris is the only guy that's gonna talk, and almost to the point, like I've heard, like sometimes like the timeout ends before Mitch gets to talk sometimes,
Right.
because Chris
Yeah.
has gone on so long. And if you talk to the people around the team, like this group needed that and still needs that, like needs that guy. And, you know, he's going to be gone one day and hopefully someone else can take up the mantle. But until that day, like the Spurs want to lean on that.
Yeah.
Very much. Like I don't think it's like there are a million reasons the Spurs won their 23rd game last night. I know it's not something we're celebrating, but they haven't won a 23rd game in a season in 3 years, like 3 calendar years. So the reason, if there's any reason they have taken a step this year, I mean, there's many reasons, but Chris Paul's way near the top of that list. Just him being in that locker room, being around, showing people how it's done, and not just telling people how it's done, but being on the floor and showing people how it's done. That's a huge reason that if they've made any kind of progress, and they have, like he's a huge reason for it.
Yep.
The seating chart in the home locker room is significant too in this discussion. Chris next to Stephon.
Yep.
That's no, that didn't happen by happenstance,
Well, yeah, nothing with this team happens by happenstance.
Right.
It's all very manicured.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing, and I made this point in the column that anyone who thinks that this is just like a Mitch Johnson willy-nilly decision that he decided after they made this trade, and that it would be different if Greg Popovich is coaching or what have you. Like, do you think that sure, yes, the head coach fills out the lineup card. It's a Mitch Johnson decision. But what in the past quarter century of following this organization leads you to believe that that any decision like that is made just off the cuff, and that the whole organization isn't involved in thinking this, and probably has been thinking about it for a long time leading up to the trade that they made, all that type of stuff. Like it's not just Mitch Johnson going rogue here.
Yeah,
it's that seems really naive to me.
I had someone, I guess it's not tweet at you, blue sky at you, whatever it is, last night.
Say it's on Blue Sky.
This would never, that's Blue Sky. This would never happen if Pop was here. I'm like, are you kidding me? It most definitely would.
Yes.
Like most definitely, most like even more so, like if more so than it is now. Like it would like 100 million times more.
Right.
And I'm not 100% sure that like I don't know if we want to talk about this, but I'm not sure exactly how much input Pop is having right now. But I was
going to say we haven't
be surprised
the listeners lately, but Mitch does talk to Pop every day.
That's what he says.
Close to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
which is an encouraging sign.
I don't think this is like like you said, going rogue. I think if anything, Pop is on board with this and might even be behind it.
Yeah. Tom has a big weekend. Jeff and I are still on the East Coast. Hopefully we can get back.
Wait, are we not going to talk about Bismack Biyombo? We got a new player.
You have 12 seconds on Bismack Biyombo.
I'm kidding. He hasn't played yet. But I'll tell you what. When he plays, then we can talk about him. How's that?
Okay.
When he gets a rebound, we'll talk about it.
When we get Jeff and I hopefully get back and beat another winter storm. But Tom has a really big weekend of Spurs action in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, and in Oakland, where there's some events. Like I was thinking about, like Victor Wembanyama made his first All-Star team. He's going to be in the Skills Challenge with Chris Paul. But Stephon could play all 3 nights, right, Tom?
Yes.
Like he's in the rookie game. He's in the slam dunk contest.
Yes.
And if his team in the rookie game wins, he'll be part of an All-Star, the All-Star tournament.
I think
that could be big for him.
Yeah, I think that middle one you mentioned is the one there. The organization and him are anticipating the most, the dunk contest. I mean, Jeff can attest to this. There's been more secrecy around his lineup for the dunk contest, what he's going to do, than the invasion of Normandy. I mean, it's been hush hush. Anyone that sees or gleans anything from the practices are sworn to secrecy. I got strong armed in L.A. by none other than the Unk himself, Chris Paul. I witnessed one of those dunks, and Chris Paul said, "Now don't you go printing that." So, there's a lot of secrecy around that, but Castle's, I mean, he's really excited about it too.
What would you print that he dunked?
Yeah, right. What he did, how he did it. Yeah.
That was like the road trip that Tom and I were on last year when we were sworn to the secrecy about Victor Wembanyama's new shoes that Tom and I would have never noticed in a million years. Like, you had the right two reporters there if you wanted to hide like a new sneaker release. Same thing with the.
Well, the story out of that dunk in LA was that he soared over Wemby with Chris Paul on Wemby's shoulders, but I didn't.
While cooking an entire roasted chicken.
Right, exactly.
Here's like legitimately what I'm looking forward to All-Star Weekend is how Wemby approaches it. Because we were talking to him about this last night, like this stuff where they don't really play and they just kind of fart around and they give up dunks. Like, Wemby's not really into that, is what he said. Like, the gist of the quote he said is like, if that's what they want to do, like, I'm going to be the guy that shows the contrast. I'm going to be the guy diving for loose balls. And I was just like, and hustling and just trying too hard. And I was thinking, did the Spurs know this? Like, I'm going to ask Mitch, are y'all cool with Wemby diving for loose balls in the All-Star game?
But anyway, but he could be the guy that saves the All-Star game.
It's going to be so funny if everyone else is half-assing it like they always do, and Wemby gets like 27 blocks.
But NBA players, athletes in general, just competitors. If there's one guy trying, then the instinct is to like go back at that guy, and maybe it just takes one guy trying for it all to be fixed. I wouldn't count on it, but I think it's a possibility. That could be fun.
Like, in the middle of that discussion last night, I asked him, so you're saying that you're going to play defense in the All-Star game? And he looked at me with a look like I was asking him, like, you say you're going to breathe oxygen. Like, of course, you idiot. Why would you ask that question of me? Was kind of the look I got from him. So that's going to be fun to watch.
We'll see.
Yeah, he's already said he's not going there to make friends. Wemby's got enough friends. He doesn't want to make friends out there.
It's like every reality, like if you've ever seen Top Chef or
I have not. No.
Any reality, like going back to
is this sort of like Temptation Island?
I don't go to their Temptation Island to make
the Golden Bachelor.
I don't go to the Golden Bachelor. I guess you do go to
30-day fiance
Bachelor to find. Anyway, that's Wemby. Do I have to do the frivolous thing, Tom? Since that we promised earlier.
Oh yeah. You got to tell the Jeremy Sohan story. You got to do it.
Speaking of food, real quick tip for Boston. You guys were talking about that before the show, but if you go out to eat tonight, Italian restaurant in the North End, skip the cannoli, skip the tiramisu, and ask the waiter or waitress for ricotta pie. I'm telling you, you won't regret it. Ricotta pie.
Thanks.
All right.
Sounds fat.
Tom, you were observing this the other night. We're about to talk about, and you couldn't, I guess, vouch for the fact that I did not make this up.
No,
but well, with listeners of the show might be surprised to know that the swaggering, just herbaceous man of the world host might not be the most stylish individual on the planet. I know that might come as a shock, but I
think the official your attire has been described as corn pone chic.
It might. How on TNT and ESPN they have the fit cam for the players walking in. Like the cameramen actually turn their backs when the columnist from the San Antonio Express News walks down the hallway. They don't want that on camera. And I understand why. Anyway, we're waiting after the Charlotte game for Victor Wembanyama to speak at his locker. Meanwhile, Jeremy Sohan, wonderful, affable young fella, is putting on a pair of boots that I just assumed cost more than my car. Like they're like leather suede. There's like a cutout for the big toe, or there's an indentation there, they're nothing like I've ever seen before. But he told me the name of the designer, and it was Italian, and I'm sorry I don't remember it, but basically I made some kind of offhanded comment about how much those boots probably cost. And Jeremy Sohan very loudly, very enthusiastically told me, Tom, that if I bought a pair, the host of Spurs Insider, Mike Finger, if he buys a pair for himself and not knockoffs, Jeremy said, I'm going to check to see if they're knockoffs. If I buy a pair and I wear them to a Spurs game this year into the locker room, that Jeremy Sohan will grant me an hour-long interview. Isn't that right? He said a full hour.
Yeah.
Anything you want to ask.
No questions off limits. No subject off limit.
No subject off limits. He'll answer any question that I come up with, give me an honest answer the whole way, and I can have a full hour, and it's exclusive. Nobody else can have it. And that's funny. But like there's and people are saying, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this. I can't afford it. Like, I don't know how much those boots cost, but there is no way. I'll try to expense this to Nick Talbot, who's on the podcast listening in. And there's no way I'm getting that across. Like, how much money could I hide an expense report that would allow me to
$0
expense these boots? $0.
$0.
Like, even if you get, but even if you get the most incredible interview of all time from Jeremy,
If you can find that, I don't think 10 cents at Goodwill, we're all be able to try.
I don't think there's anything that Jeremy Sohan could say. He just hasn't had the career yet that would make this worth it. But it was an amusing evening. I will say
Non-basketball stuff that would be the best.
Yeah.
it would be. I don't think it's going to happen.
Tell him he has to come and be the person on our high school awards show as well.
Oh no, you don't want him. You don't want him around kids. His language is not safe for work.
The language is he has his no.
Did you hear him? I don't know. Did you hear him last night? He basically committed an FCC violation on the TV broadcast.
What's funny is we're waiting in the hallway. We're talking to Wemby in the hallway while we're getting text messages from people back in San Antonio about how Jeremy Sohan just cursed on the air in his interview with Jacob Toby and PJ Carlissimo. And Jeff and I didn't see that, but we see the text message from people who say that Jeremy apparently cursed on the air. And then as he's walking by the interview, it was the Darren Fox interview. He leans into the crowd of reporters and screams in obscenity at Darren Fox. It's like in fun, in jest, in fun, but still, this is basically just telling Nick Talbot.
Yeah, when you're
do not have Jeremy Sohan host the Express News High School Award.
Yeah, when you're getting an MC for an event with high school kids, it shouldn't be a guy that made PJ Carlissimo blush.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe he'd do it. Maybe he wouldn't.
He would do it, but
we'll
those kids have all heard worse.
The prediction thing, we'll be back after the All-Star game. There's just one game, one regular season game before that. It's going to be hard for anyone to predict a 1-0 against the Celtics, who were one of the best teams in the league. So I won't waste everybody's time with that. But we do like to close with some predictions. Any call for the weekend, Tom, that you're going to be covering in San Francisco? Any one specific prognostication?
Stephon Castle wins the dunk contest.
There's
been too much secrecy around it to not to make.
He has the talent to do it.
Also, I don't think they're going to give it to Mac McClung 3 times in a row. Like that guy, I mean, no offense to him. No offense to him. He cannot be the first back-to-back slam dunk contest winner in NBA history. Like that just can't happen. I think the novelty of the tiny white guy beating everybody is kind of wearing off. So I think he'll be dinged. I think Steph can take it home.
Nick and Jeff, anything specific that you expect to see this weekend?
I'm going to say the over-under on Wemby blocks and it's not an actual All-Star game, is it? It's a tournament.
Oh, yeah. it's a different format this
So
year.
I don't know how to
It's basically a game because they played a 40. They might play a 40 twice or whatever it is. It's sort of like a one total game.
All right, in the my over, no matter how many games Wemby plays, my over under for blocks is 5, and I might take the over.
Uh-huh.
How
There you go.
The
And you,
That'll be
did you do like an MVP of the tournament instead of the game?
I guess so.
yeah.
That'll be so great to see. Wemby going nuts, blocking shots. That'd be great.
But yeah,
That would be
I'll
fun.
agree with Tom and say that Castle wins the slam dunk contest. I think that
There you go.
it'll help lead his rookie of the year candidacy because people play that for whatever reason instead.
He's been really good lately. I think he's on his way back. He might be the favorite. But there's
It's a bad
we'll get
class.
into all that. We'll get into all that after the break. Next week we will have Tom rehash his weekend with the Stars. We will look forward to the second half of the rodeo trip, which this year features a stopover in Austin for 2 games. We'll look forward to those next week. Again, check out that. I'm going to do this one more time just to be a good employee and get that number again. For the subtext, the Spurs subtext, text GSG to 210-934-9628. I did my job there. And keep doing your job out there and keep taking care of each other and keeping it real.